Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon. I'm Carissa Cheng with your news and sports updates to 3 o'clock on 1680 The Crow. Minister for Emergency Preparedness Bill Blair announced that the federal government is contributing another $557 million to help BC rebuild after the November 2021 floods. Blair made the announcement in Abbotsford today and added that the additional funding is meant to help mitigate future disasters.
And just simply rebuilding back to the state that we were in previously is a recipe for future costs. And we know that every dollar we invest in prevention can reduce the cost of recovery by as much as $10. And so this is also an investment in not only future resiliency, but in cost avoidance.
This payment will be made through the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangements Program and will bring the total amount of money given to BC to over $1 million. Coquitlam RCMP is reminding residents to park their cars in secure spaces after they received reports of catalytic converter thefts. Joshua Mokhtaband reports.
Frontline officers for the Coquitlam RCMP have had a busy weekend. On Sunday, January 15th, they were called to respond to a catalytic converter theft near Rochester Avenue and Blue Mountain Street. Corporal Alexa Hodgins is with the Coquitlam RCMP.
Any vehicle really that is parked on the street that has a catalytic converter, so these are gas-powered vehicles. The newer models that are electric don't have catalytic converters, and it really is just a crime of opportunity.
Coquitlam residents are urged to park in well-lit and well-populated areas. The public is encouraged to report suspicious activity to the RCMP as soon as possible. This is Joshua Mokhtaband, 1680 The Crow.
Following the call for a special meeting yesterday evening, the Rowing Canada Aviron has decided that it will not be dismissing its current board members. Reporter Seamus Page with more.
After a close vote of 58 to 42%, tallying a total of 265 votes, the current board for the RCA will remain in power at least until they're up for election in September of this year. Following the vote, Lindsay Bergen, the athletic director of the board and the only person on the board who was not up for removal, concluded with this comment on the meeting.
As a board, our desire is to bring together all members of RCA after this special meeting to address the impact this journey has had on our organization.
For now, the board will remain with the RCA. Most members will be up for re-election in September, while the president's position will not be up until 2025. Seamus Page, 1680, The Crow.
We're now joined by our reporter Seamus Page. Seamus, tell us, what were the concerns that the membership had about the current board?
Well, one of the main grievances were a lack of transparency and communication from the board, leaving some members feeling as though complaints weren't being properly addressed.
And seeing as the board will be staying, what is their plan moving forward?
At the end of last night's meeting, they did encourage a spirit of collaboration and a commitment to better transparency between the board and the members. President of the RCA board emphasized that the organization has trusted her with 2 previous elections and that they should continue to trust her in the future.
Thanks, Seamus. The BC government has updated the Mental Health Act to more quickly help patients during a crisis. With this amendment, nurse practitioners now have the authority to assess patients for involuntary admission. Mental Health and Addictions Minister Jennifer Whiteside says this change will help reduce pressure on emergency departments.
This is about ensuring that we have the resources in our emergency rooms so that our healthcare practitioners can take that handoff from a police officer and get that individual into the appropriate kind of care.
She adds that this change will also help police officers spend less time in emergency wards waiting for patients to be admitted. BC Green Party leader Fiona Furstenau is calling for a better work-life balance for British Columbians. She says a 4-day work week without additional hours or any pay cuts would be an innovative, people-first approach that could renew the workplace. A statement from the BC Greens says pilot programs and trails in many areas, including BC, have found that a 4-day work week is good for businesses and good for people. First to Know says the provincial government should offer a tax break to businesses as an incentive and as a next step to making a shorter work week a reality. Shielding that was meant to protect patients' reproductive organs when getting X-rays done is being removed. Our reporter Kiara Collins reports.
The Canadian Association of Medical Radiation Technologists have made a recommendation to remove shielding based on new studies showing there is little to no radiation coming off of new advanced X-ray machines. Possible patients like Reem Al-Kayed are confused about the decision.
If we still have like a chance to get hurt by this radiation, why they are moving that, even if it's advanced, because any radiation could be affect us.
The recommendation says there is no benefit or disadvantage to the shield, and having it can cause risk of misplacement, causing a repeat scan. As a patient, you can talk with your technologist and ask for the shield. Kiara Collins, 1680 The Crow.
Environmental groups and a First Nation based in the Lower Fraser River Canyon are optimistic that help is on the way to protect the habitat of the critically endangered northern spotted owl. The Wilderness Committee, Eco-Justice and Spazum Nation says the Federal Minister of Environment and Climate Change has proposed an emergency order under the Species at Risk Act. Only 3 spotted owls are known to be in the wild right now, but a captive breeding program is working to raise the numbers. Rallies and vigils will be held across the country tomorrow to mark the first anniversary of Russia's Ukraine invasion. Dozens of Canadian events are planned in Comox, Kelowna, Prince George, Langley, Victoria, Vancouver, and Whitehorse. An estimated 1/3 of Ukraine's 41 million people have been displaced, and Ukraine's infrastructure and economy has been devastated. A statement from Municipal Affairs Minister Ann Kang says more than 11,000 Ukrainians have arrived in BC since the war started. Now on to international news. U.S. federal investigators are trying to determine the cause of a small plane crash in Arkansas that killed 5 employees from an environmental consulting firm. Dave Packer reports.
The twin-engine plane crashing in poor weather shortly after taking off from Little Rock, Arkansas Wednesday. It was heading for Ohio, carrying 5 employees of CTEH, the company that's providing support for a metal plant explosion outside of Cleveland earlier this week. All aboard died. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg while visiting the derailment site in East Palestine, Ohio.
I met with some of their personnel earlier today who are mourning the loss of their friends and colleagues. Some of whom were involved in this response as they were on their way to another one.
The FAA and NTSB will investigate. Dave Packer, ABC News.
A Chicago judge sentenced singer R. Kelly to 20 years in prison for child pornography and the enticement of minors for sex. Federal prosecutor John Losh gave credit to the victims after today's sentencing.
I cannot thank enough the folks who came forward so that we were able to bring R. Kelly to justice and to be able to receive the sentence that we did receive today of 20 years.
Kelly will be serving 19 years of that sentence simultaneously with his 30-year sentence imposed last year in New York. A Los Angeles judge on Thursday sentenced Harvey Weinstein to 16 years in prison. This sentencing comes on top of the more than 20 years that the 70-year-old Weinstein has left to serve. Weinstein addressed the court today and said that he was innocent. Netflix is cutting the price of subscriptions in some countries. Jason Nathanson with more.
As competition increases in the streaming realm and Wall Street demands subscriber growth, Netflix is dropping its prices around the world by as much as half in some countries. Analyst Toby Halloran with Ampere says more than 100 territories are seeing an immediate cut, from the Middle East to Africa, Latin America, and more. He believes more than 5% of Netflix's 200 million plus subscribers will see a drop in the amount they pay. The news first.
It's currently 4 degrees with a sunny sky. I'm Carissa Cheng for 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Teresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
This is sports on 1680 The Crow.
Welcome back to 1680 The Crow. I'm Carissa Cheng with your sports updates. It was another night of high-flying hockey for the projected number 1 pick in this year's NHL draft. North Vancouver's Connor Bedard recorded a 6-point game as he led his Regina Pals over the Medicine Hat Tigers 6-3. He put up 1 goal and 5 assists in the effort, as he now has as many 6-point games this year as 0-point games. As of this morning, the Anaheim Ducks own the best chance of landing the first draft pick of the 2023 entry draft, followed by the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Chicago Blackhawks. Now on to some curling news. Manitoba's Jennifer Jones has advanced to the playoffs at the Scotties Tournament of Hearts in Kamloops, BC. The 6-time national champion edged Casey Scheindegger's wildcard team 7-5 in an extra end to reach a record of 6-1. Jones' new teammates this year are all under 25 and looking for their first Hearts title. The 46-year-old skip says her team is getting sharper as the playoffs approach.
We're almost there. We just have a couple of ends where we maybe a couple of sloppy ends. So if we can just get away from those, we're feeling pretty good.
Manitoba caps the preliminary round today against New Brunswick before the 6-team championship round begins Friday. The Canucks are in St. Louis tonight to play the Blues. Both teams are in 6th place in their respective divisions. Brandon Saad will return to the Blues lineup after missing 3 games with an upper body injury, while Atu Ratu will make his Canucks debut, having been called up from Abbotsford yesterday. The game begins at 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Port Coquitlam's newest junior hockey team has officially unveiled its logo. The Port Coquitlam Trailblazers shared their branding on social media today. The logo features a roundel with mountains and a bridge resembling the Pitt River Bridge. Colors chosen were purple, gold, and white. Previous Port Coquitlam junior hockey teams have worn this color scheme, which were the original colors of the Los Angeles Kings. The team revealed their name yesterday and will begin playing in the Pacific Junior Hockey League next season. Gymnastics Canada CEO Ian Moss is out of the top spot for the sporting body. In a statement, the organization said it is moving forward with substantive changes in leadership. Athletes in the sport had been calling for Moss's resignation for months, writing an open letter to Sport Canada in March 2022, asking for an investigation into the culture of abuse in gymnastics. The organization released a report in late January which found a lack of integrated national standards and leadership in the sports ecosystem. They recommended taking steps towards accountability and the well-being of athletes. John Motson, one of Britain's most known voices in sports, has died at the age of 77. Motson commented for soccer for the BBC. Former professional football player Nadam Onewa says he remembers Motson for his incredible commentary. That's all for your sports updates to 3 o'clock. I'm Carissa Cheng for 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. Now it's time for the comment.
Tanking is a touchy subject for hockey executives, players, and fans. In essence, tanking is the process of losing intentionally to better position a team for a higher draft pick. While some may think it is not a competitive and fair strategy, I argue it is. First, draft lotteries prevent a flat-out race to the bottom, though your chances of landing a top pick increase further down the standings. Second, general managers are the ones making decisions that will impact a team's talent. Players remain committed to being competitive. Finally, teams stuck in the middle, not good enough to make the playoffs, yet not bad enough to land high talent in the draft, can get stuck in this cycle. As for cheering for losses, it can be an odd sentiment to share with other fans, but surely they can understand what is at stake. When it comes to that draft lottery, fans will be on the edge of their seat waiting to find out where Connor Bedard will begin his NHL career. Jacob New, 1680, The Crow.
It's extremely important for people to stay healthy and to stay active as much as possible.
This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Welcome, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Crow Chronicles. I'm John Park.
And I'm Riley Lung.
In today's episode, we will talk about the impact of BC Hydro's Site C project. This is a massive one.
Well, to start off a little backstory, the Site C project is a massive dam that will flood the Peace River Valley. That's all the way up in northern BC. Construction started in the summer of 2015, and as of 2022, it has costed taxpayers, well over $16 billion so far. And that's $9 billion over the original amount.
Man, imagine all, the maple syrup that you can buy, or,
Okay, we
space
don't
syrup.
always drink maple syrup, okay? Maybe once in a while for
I
you
do
Canadians.
enjoy it, so...
Oh, well, whatever. Well, when it began, BC Hydro has faced many protests over the years, all over BC, especially at the Site C site. Obviously. Especially back in 2019 when the West Morbally First Nations renewed the lawsuit against BC Hydro. And I'm sure many people have seen protesters all over. And the West Morbally is basically the main nation being affected by Site C Dam, especially since the Site C Dam is in their home, the Peace River Valley.
Well, I'm going to add one thing that Riley missed out here. Well, while they do have some troubles with the First Nation group, it is important to remember that the project that they're doing will power around 450,000 homes, or 1.7 million electric vehicles per year in British Columbia once this project is completed and is running.
Do you have proof of that?
Well, that is what the BC Hydro is currently claiming in their project overview. But hey, listen to this. They're becoming so efficient with their technology that Site C will generate about 35% of the energy produced at their previous Bennett Dam, with only 5% of the reservoir. So they're becoming very efficient while using so little amount of water. So things are getting better. I mean, it's looking good. It's looking great.
You gotta think about it. Where Site C currently is, that place can feed well over 1 million people, as it's like top tier fertile land. And it used to be a burial site as well, because you had to think about the ethical parts, right? West Morbidly First Nations chief, I interviewed him a little while ago. He's actually talked about this. I'll insert a clip right here. His name is Roland Wilson.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. It's class 1, class 2 agricultural land in the valley here, and it's the only class 1 and class 2 agricultural land. Just for that fact, they should have protected it, saved it for future generations.
Wow, that is so horrible. I mean, wow, it's my first time hearing about this. Thanks for interviewing him, Riley. Well, this is going to make me sound like a really bad person, but I did agree with the person that I interviewed with, and he's a really interesting person. I interviewed Henry Chang, who is a faculty at the Mechanical Engineering Department at BCIT. He knew about the BC Hydro's hydroelectric dam as an engineer, and he talked a lot about moving forward in the future, about how we need more electricity and how we need more EV vehicles. Therefore, we need this dam.
Do you have a clip of that? I need some proof, you know?
Yes, I do, and here's a clip from Henry Chang.
As far as I know, it's a huge project in northern BC, and because we need clean energy in the future forward. We need to have lots of EV, so we need as much as we can. So,
well, isn't that interesting, Shauna?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, now I want to move on to the main topic. In 2019, West Morbidly renewed the lawsuit against Site C, though the project was more than half done. But then again, they still tried to shut it down. But unfortunately, in the end, in 2022, what they got out of it was, oh, we did too much already, we can't back out of it now. Here is what Mr. Wilson has said about it.
Don't build the dam. And Horgan turned around and said, well, we spent too much money, it's too late now, we got to keep going. And they got to argue that in court, but the judges sided with them and didn't side with us on the impact.
I was listening a little bit back on that clip. There was, as part of the interview, he did state that there was other options of obtaining clean electricity. I will also put Mr. Wilson's clip in that as well.
Site C is still not needed. There's other means of acquiring the energy, more effective means of acquiring the energy, cheaper means of acquiring the energy, and the impacts are still too great to the indigenous people of northeastern BC.
Well, Sean, what do you think about that?
Well, he does have a point, but just listen to me for 1 second, okay? So it's not like BC Hydro didn't really consider that as well. They did think about it, and they know that there are other alternative clean resources, such as like thermal generation by using LNG. Like in terms of financially and like the technical difficulty, all that kind of stuff. When they considered all of that aspects, they decided that, well, hydro is really the best way to go. Well, here's the thing, and I'm basing this off from what BC Hydro said, and I quote, "The Site C project provides the best combination for the amount of energy and dependable capacity that Site C can provide if they go through with this instead of using other alternative resources."
The solar, we don't have, it's not a very good place to have solar. And then the winds, and also it's going to be not very suitable in BC here.
Well, just adding on to that point there, well, I know that solar is technically viable in western part of Canada, but it's just that, well, we do have lots of cloudy and dark winters here, and at that point, solar power is not really going to generate much energy at that point. And I heard that they cost up to like, what, 1 million just for like a single cell battery? And that's super expensive, right? And as for wind, oh, don't get me talking about this. Look, there's lots of mountains here in British Columbia, and you can't try to put wind turbines there, but it's going to cause lots of havoc. Like, it's going to cause lots of damage, especially to the rotor blades, because it's mountainous. It's just not a good place to have them. So the only option that we have is really hydro at this point.
Yeah. Well, and solar, I read about it a while ago. Solar panels are like a massive waste. A lot of people say it's like clean, all that stuff. No, it's just as bad as fossil fuels, as they take up a lot of landfill.
I haven't heard of any other side effect apart from Aboriginal people. They have the concern about their ancestors' burial the ground. But any project is going to negatively affect some other people.
I also kind of want to talk about when in 2019, West Moberly and 4 other First Nation groups, they went to the UN conference and they presented their the difficulties that the BC government and the Canadian government were putting on them and like what they were doing to their land. Here's an explanation about that.
We had a sit down with them and explain the situation, and they came out with their statement that Site C was actually a racist project. It was environmentally racist, culturally racist, that it actually went against what the UN put forward, asked British Columbia to stop what they were doing. And BC and Canada, they asked them to stop. This isn't just an issue with BC. We have a treaty in place here that's constitutionally protected with Canada.
So the UN actually acknowledged that their rights were violated from Treaty 8, but they really couldn't do anything about it. For those who do not know what Treaty 8 is, it's basically the Canadian government gave a large piece of land spanning 3 provinces, I believe. The First Nation community can exercise their rights. But during the construction of the Site C, BC Hydro and the BC government, they never really consulted, and when they did, it was practically too late. So in this case, their rights were violated heavily in this factor.
The UN said, you guys are in fault, you're wrong, you need to change what you're doing, and UN has no authority over Canada or BC. And they basically just thumbed their nose at the UN and went about. That's one of the sad things. Nobody can hold Canada in check or any other country in check, and they could have pulled sanctions on them, I guess, and squeezed them that way, but nobody was willing to do that for Indians. We're not important enough for them.
Well, Sean, got any questions, any comments? What are your opinions on this?
Well, to begin with, I know that UN has lots of tasks on their hand. But to be fair, that does not excuse them from just glancing over this issue, saying they have no jurisdiction. Well, what's the point of the UN then? The whole point of United Nations was to do something in these kind of situations. Yeah. Isn't that the whole point?
Yeah, that is kind of the whole point, is to enforce the international law, no?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but in this case, they can't control Canada over anything, as Roland Wilson said in that clip before. The most they could do is just place sanctions on them, which would really do nothing but harm at that point.
Well, but then again, I still like to believe that they should have done something more than just say we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say to go as far as to place sanctions. I would maybe try to raise awareness and then try to bring something done. Because usually by starting off by trying to gain awareness, that leads to something, and that something can maybe change into a movement so that, well...
Yeah, well, they already do have a movement before. They did have a movement, I'm sure. And it got to the point where they had to go to the UN. But the UN at that point was kind of pointless. Maybe they could have just threatened Canada,
Yeah, I suppose. I think they should have done that, because this story is really just heartbreaking. I knew that the indigenous people were suffering, but I didn't know that they were impacted to this extent. This is very surprising to me. Although I acknowledge how heartbreaking and unfair it is, we cannot change the fact that climate change is imminent. Well, actually, it's already happening, but... Well, in the long run, Site C will be beneficial to us, BC Hydro claims that it can last for over 100 years. Hundreds of years of clean energy. Think about that. And best of all, the sources of all these energies are relatively free compared to fossil fuels. Free as in they're easily obtainable and less expensive. Think about solar. I mean, you're just relying on the sun to get it. And for the wind turbines, well, you're just relying on the wind, right? And for hydro, you are basically relying on gravity to do the work itself, just relying on nature. So, free as in that kind of free.
If we don't do it in the future, it's just much warmer planets which we cannot accept. So I think in this province, hydro we still need to pursue the hydro, although you have this negative environmental impact.
Well, Sean, this topic has been very interesting and conflictive, but I think we should end it off here. I would like to thank the interviewees Roland Wilson and Henry Chang for taking the time to speak with us. And we would like to thank you too for tuning in this episode of The Crow Chronicles. My name is Riley Lung.
And my name is Sean Park. Please check out and follow our social media handles. It's at BCIT_journalism on Twitter and at BCIT News on Instagram and Facebook. And hear more news from me, follow my SoundCloud at SeanPark9004. That's Sean with SEAN. See you next time, folks.